The room was silent, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that pressed against the walls like fog, clinging to every surface, filling the air with a thickness that made it hard to breathe. Blood pooled beneath the edge of a mahogany desk, slowly trailing into the Persian rug, staining the intricate floral designs with a vivid red. The body of Edward Langston, a high-profile real estate mogul, was slumped forward in his leather chair, a single gunshot wound to his head, execution style. Detective Rump stood over the scene, eyes narrowed, hands clasped behind his back. Behind him, a team of forensic techs bustled, snapping photos, bagging evidence, and murmuring their observations. But one man didn't bustle. One man stood still, camera in hand, eyes sweeping the room with a quiet intensity. Before we begin today's story, please let us know where you are viewing from. Please remember to subscribe if you like this video. Mark had seen worse, much worse. But something about this scene unsettled him. Maybe it was the odd angle of the blood spatter. Maybe it was the missing laptop from Langston's desk. Or maybe it was the feeling in his gut, the one he'd learned never to ignore. He raised his camera and clicked. A flash filled the room. This was no ordinary murder. Mark had been a crime scene photographer for 13 years. His colleagues at the precinct called him Ghost Eyes, because he seemed to catch things no one else did. He didn't say much, didn't socialize at precinct parties, and never spoke about his past. What they didn't know was that Mark had once studied fine art photography in college, dreaming of gallery exhibits and magazine spreads. That dream died in a blaze of sirens and shattered glass on a summer night 12 years ago. A drunk driver had plowed into his car, killing his fiancée, Lila, instantly. Mark survived, barely. The camera in his back seat was shattered, just like everything else he thought he knew. After months in the hospital and a grief-fueled spiral, he turned to documenting crime. Not out of fascination, but necessity. Capturing horror gave him purpose. He didn't care for justice, he cared for truth. Photographs didn't lie. People did. Detective Rump, a burly man with a bulldog's temper, was the lead on the Langston case. Mark had worked with him for years and knew his style. Rush to judgment, find a suspect, close the file. Quick and dirty. Got what you need, Ghost Eyes? Rump asked, not looking at Mark. Almost, Mark said, crouching to photograph a scuff mark on the floor behind the chair. It didn't match Langston's shoes. As he clicked the shutter, Mark noticed a faint imprint, a partial shoe print, only visible in the reflection of spilled coffee. He silently adjusted his angle and took another shot. Rump turned to leave. Media's already outside. Let's wrap it up. Mark didn't answer. His camera did. 2 days later, the headline screamed, "Billionaire commits suicide amid scandal." Mark stared at the paper in disbelief. Suicide? There was no weapon at the scene. No note. And Langston had just closed a massive development deal worth hundreds of millions. He had enemies. He had leverage. He had secrets. He also had blood spatter that contradicted the idea he pulled the trigger. Mark walked into the evidence room, badge hanging from his neck, and pulled up the crime scene photos. The print in the coffee puddle had vanished from the final report. The image had been cropped. The photo metadata had been altered. He knew his files. Someone had tampered with them. That night, Mark called the only person he trusted. Water. Water, real name Will T. Waters, was a retired forensics analyst with a sharp mind and an allergy to nonsense. They'd worked dozens of cases together before Water took early retirement after a messy internal scandal involving falsified evidence. Mark met him at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. "Langston didn't kill himself," Mark said without preamble. Water raised an eyebrow. "You got proof?" "Photos. At least I did. Someone scrubbed them." Water sipped his coffee. "That's big. Big enough that someone with power wants it buried. You sure you want to dig?" "I need to know." Water slid a napkin across the table and scribbled an address. "Go here. Storage unit. Box 42. I kept backup files on key cases. If Langston's in the system, it'll be there. Mark took the napkin, pocketed it, and stood. Watch your back, Water said. You're not just stepping on toes. You're kicking down doors. Mark nodded and walked out. The rain started falling as he reached his car. He didn't notice the black SUV that pulled out of the lot moments later. The storage facility was a maze of rusted metal and dim lighting. Mark punched in the code Water gave him and stepped inside Unit 42. A thin layer of dust coated everything. Rows of file boxes lined the shelves, each labeled with case numbers and dates. He found Langston's box near the bottom. Inside were original prints, crime scene reports, and a thumb drive. Mark pocketed the drive and leafed through the documents. One file in particular stood out, an old homicide file from 6 years ago. Victim: Julian Marr, investigative journalist. COD, gunshot to the head. Staged as a burglary. The connection? Julian Marr had been investigating land fraud and political bribery, and Edward Langston's name appeared in Marr's final notes. Suddenly, Mark heard footsteps. He turned off the light and drew back into the shadows. A man stepped into the unit, flashlight sweeping the space. Not police. No uniform. Mark held his breath. The man stepped closer to the box. Mark lunged, knocking the flashlight away. They struggled briefly before Mark shoved the intruder out and slammed the unit door shut. He bolted it and ran. Back in his apartment, Mark plugged in the thumb drive. Encrypted. He called Water. Someone followed me. Tried to get the files. Then you hit a nerve, Water replied. You need help. I know a guy. Used to work in cybercrime. Goes by the name Biden. Seriously? Like the president? He gets that a lot. I'll set it up. Don't trust anyone else. Not even the department. Especially not Rump. Mark leaned back, staring at the drive. Whatever this was, it ran deeper than Langston. Deeper than a single case. It was just beginning. Mark met Biden at a shabby cafe tucked behind an electronics repair store. The man had a scruffy beard, piercing eyes, and fingers that never stopped tapping. You got the drive? Biden asked. Mark slid it across the table. Encrypted with AES 256. Whoever did this knew what they were doing, Biden muttered, inserting the thumb drive into his laptop. His fingers flew. After a few tense minutes, he whistled low. This isn't just about Langston. These files, they're surveillance reports. Payoffs. Blackmail material. Looks like Langston was running some sort of clearinghouse for dirty money, laundering it through shell companies tied to city contracts. Mark leaned in. And Marr. He was onto them. This folder, M, contains all the notes Langston had on Marr. Surveillance logs, emails intercepted, even a photo of Marr meeting with a whistleblower from the mayor's office. Mark exhaled slowly. So Langston wasn't just a crook. He was a puppet master. Biden nodded. And someone cleaned house when he got too greedy, or too paranoid. My guess? He kept these files as insurance. Someone found out. Biden copied the files to a secure cloud vault. You need a digital deadman switch. If anything happens to you, these files go public. I can set that up. Mark agreed. His hands trembled just slightly. And Rump? Biden glanced up. His name's in the logs. He was on Langston's payroll. Mark arranged a second meeting with Water and Biden at an abandoned photo studio he used to work in, neutral ground. Water brought physical records. Biden brought printouts of the decrypted files. The three of them stood around a dusty table, piecing together the puzzle. Langston had dirt on half the city council, Water said, spreading out documents. Real estate kickbacks, ghost companies, shell bids on public projects. He kept tabs on every bribe he paid. Biden added, he had offshore accounts linked to fake charities. Most of it traces back to a single holding company, Neoteric Holdings. It's a front. And guess who signed its incorporation? Mark looked down. Detective Rump's signature stared back at him. Suddenly, glass shattered upstairs. A stun grenade clattered through the window. "Down!" Water shouted, flipping the table. Smoke and chaos filled the room. Armed men flooded in, mercenaries, not cops. Mark grabbed Biden and Water, dragging them through a back exit he remembered from his studio days. They escaped into an alley, coughing, bleeding, but alive. "They know we know," Biden said. "And now they're coming." Mark clutched his camera like a weapon. "Then we go to war, with the truth." Mark, Biden and Water fled the city, laying low in an old ranger station Water owned in the hills. There, surrounded by trees and static-filled radios, they regrouped. Biden continued combing through the files, piecing together a master list of names. Politicians, officers, judges. Meanwhile, Mark began photographing everything. Documents, emails, call logs, bank transfers. He cataloged the evidence like a crime scene, turning each piece into a visual confession. If they were going to expose this network, they needed more than proof. They needed undeniable, visceral impact. "We leak this piecemeal," Biden explained. "Slowly. Let public opinion build while we draw the rats out. Or we go full exposure," Mark countered. "One drop. All of it. Truth has more weight when it's complete." Water agreed. "But only if you have a delivery system strong enough to resist retaliation." Mark called in a favor. A former student of his, now working as a digital content director at a major news syndicate, agreed to air the story, provided they had clean provenance and a personal account. That night, Mark recorded a video confession. He laid out the facts, the corruption, the cover-ups. He named Rump. Then he ended with the image of Marr's last notebook entry, burned into the camera frame. Truth doesn't hide in shadows. It hides in plain sight, waiting for someone to look. The exposé detonated across every major platform within hours. The response was nuclear. City Hall went into lockdown. Protesters flooded the courthouse. Journalists chased every lead. Detective Rump was arrested, tried, and convicted on multiple counts of obstruction, bribery, and conspiracy. His mugshot made front-page news. Several city officials resigned. Others were indicted. Neoteric Holdings was dissolved, its assets seized by the feds. Mark's photos, raw, painful and honest, ran as a special feature titled Ghost Eyes, The Crimes We Chose to Ignore. Water declined all interviews. Biden disappeared from the grid entirely. Mark didn't go back to the precinct. He started a foundation in Lila's name, teaching documentary photography to at-risk youth. His camera no longer captured death. It told stories. Stories that mattered. One rainy evening, as Mark closed his classroom, he found a letter taped to the door. No return address. Inside was a single photo. Langston, years earlier, smiling with a child at a fundraiser. On the back, someone had written, "You saw what no one else did. Don't ever stop." Mark stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, he smiled.